You've crisscrossed the country like many other leaders. What has it been like for you engaging with South Africans and trying to get them to get behind Team DA?
For me, it's been... South Africans are incredibly resilient. I often talk about the reform of our economy so that we can include more people. I often talk about the reform of our government. But I think we need to talk about our society. As I've traveled across the country, you meet South Africans, you see how resilient they are. But then you face the harsh realities of what government failure looks like, actually. When I've been on the ground, I can tell you now, I was in a transit camp in KZN. Citizens were left there for 10 years, no movement. I was in Douglas in the Northern Cape. You walk into a home where a citizen, you're not sure where this person, when was their last meal, when is their next meal. Just over 50% of our citizens are living below the upper poverty line. That's been the face of this campaign. When you meet young people, you find them in streets. I've been running out We Listen sessions. You meet young people who tell you that not only are they unemployed, but they're fast becoming unemployable. And you watch in their eyes the frustration that they're getting. I think we're living in two South Africas. We live in a South Africa on one end. When you come into a place, there's probably facilities because people work, they've got healthcare, they've got all of those things. And then you come to the rest of the country, you discover very quickly that life is hard for many South Africans. That's why when we talk about One South Africa for All, it isn't just a mantra towards a non-racial future. It is in fact about saying, let's break down this wall between insiders and outsiders, because all of us must prosper together. I think Nelson Mandela said it best when he said, none of us are free until the last one is. And frankly, as I've been crisscrossing the country, I know one thing for a fact. If nothing radically changes in these elections, I think South Africa is going to face far more difficult days ahead as people begin to say, what are we going to do to bring change in our country? Because actually, when the lights go off, when people run out of water, I've been in communities where people are sharing water with animals. In 25 years. I mean, South Africans, we need radical change. We need to make sure that we build a government that can work for the people. And I think our people, I'm proud that they've cast their vote and that they express hope. But I'm also very concerned for the state where our people are at. We can, these floods taking place in KZN, the most affected people are the poor people who are in those communities. It is, for me, something that we've got to fight for reform. We really have to. Very
true. While you speak very passionately about your engagement with South Africans and what you've observed on the ground, there's this elusive black middle class, or professionals rather. Mm-hmm. And what do you make of, because I've had conversations with them, and even though there is a Mmusi Maimane or Wuang that they can relate to, even away from their business forums and boardrooms, they still stand and say, but the DA remains not an option for us. It cannot be the option for our people who we are looking out for. Because as you know, being black does come with black tax. And they then say that's not the party to help our ones in the lower classes, our ones who are impoverished, our families who remain in the townships and the villages. The black professional still says DA is still not the one. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think first of all, I'd reach out to them to say, if you want to build One South Africa for all, the facts on the table are, I personally, Mmusi Maimane, know what it's like to have siblings who now don't have a job. If we don't have this vision of putting a job in every home and a state that is capable, it will be, the issue of black tax will become even more exacerbated as more people are joining the ranks of the unemployed. The second issue is that, frankly, I think that there's sometimes a distance between where certain professionals look inside the DA, because I don't think they really look at what we do in government, the work that we do about not stealing people's money and making sure that services are designed for people. But I think the one area that I also have great sympathy for is that for many professionals who find themselves in centers of work, they come in and they say, actually in this place of work, I'm overlooked because of our historical injustices, or I find I've got a PA who happens to be of a different race to me, but earns more than me, yet I'm much more professional than them. These are issues that have emerged out of the last policy framework. I think as the DA, we've been misunderstood in believing that what we've got to do is ensure that we build places that are diverse. We've got to ensure that we actually build this dream of One South Africa for all. We've got to address inequality and the inequality born out of race. And I think more than anything, there are professionals and South Africans who are hearing that message and realizing that, in fact, if you want an economy that is growing, the only alternative is the DA. And I'm comfortable to know that as we've been speaking, as we've been engaging, suddenly, I think they're all historical issues. They're starting to rethink and say, could this organization that reflects my hopes and aspirations work towards the future? And that's the dream I'm working towards. That's what I'm engaging. That's what I'm communicating. That's what I'm working towards. Because ultimately, it requires the space that says that can we build a state that is capable, that is future orientated, and a future that is shared by all South Africans.
Let's speak about this week. You know, as a South African myself, who knew who Tony Leon was, I found it a little bit interesting to see him out on the ground campaigning for Team DA. Just like we found Thabo Mbeki being brought out and Kgalema Motlanthe on behalf of the ANC. Absolutely fascinating. These old dogs, these old politicians that we grew up with as kids, out and about. Why did the DA make a decision that Tony Leon must be out and about around Gauteng?
No, I mean, I think Tony Leon, Helen Ziller, these are people who have served in the DA, and they must come out, and I'd ask all hands on deck. I'll ask everybody to come and share a message. Because when you say it's one South Africa for all, I don't mean it must be only for this race or that race. I actually want everybody to be engaged with that vision. And the DA is the only party that can communicate that and grow in all sectors. So it then becomes important that, especially in a big campaign season now where we have to, it's the first time, and potentially, that the DA will have infrastructure right throughout the country. And it is equally so. Previously, because you target certain areas, it'd be sufficient just for one person to do it. Now you can really broaden it out. And on any given day, the DA is campaigning and brought a diversity of leadership and a depth towards leadership. And for us, we're not fighting factional battles. We're bringing an organization together that is making an offer right throughout the country. And
I want to come back to that at some point, but I want to go back to Tony Leon. So some believe Tony Leon is important because he then is able to bring in the almost the original white vote, you know. There's some sentiment on the ground that the DA is not doing so well with its traditional voters, that in fact we're starting to see them shed those members towards things like the Freedom Front Plus. That's important to have somebody like Tony Leon to try and bring them back to the DA. Is there no truth to any of that?
No, I think more than anything, and if you looked at his campaign schedule, you would have seen that it's went to particular communities across the racial landscape. Because, Tidi, I say this, I would never want to build a party for just one race. I always want to build a party for all South Africans. So we are for blacks, but not only for blacks. We are for whites, but not only for blacks, for white South Africans. We are for all South Africans and coloured and Indian South Africans. So when you looked at his campaign schedule, he was certainly out in diversity of in a diverse community. In fact, I think he'll be speaking at other functions. So and I also do think that when people see a broad range of leadership, I mean, I've had Team 1 SA members who have spread out. Bokana, Natasha Mazzoni, John Steenhuisen, Soli Malatsi. It's a diversity. And for us, we've got to not only speak about it, but live it and demonstrate it.
Now, Mmusi, there's also a sentiment that I want to kind of go into polling, and part of our last conversation was about your expectations out of the elections. Now, there's a sentiment that Ramaphosa, who's very much liked, and is liked a lot more than his own political party, so that claims that he's making headway in communities that are traditionally pro-DA. You know, think about the colored communities and the Indian communities. Have you been able to look at how favorable and how warm they remain towards the DA and you as a leader?
Look, I'm comfortable enough to know that our offer is at the center of our message. I think South Africans would obviously reflect on the fact that we had Mr. Zuma, now we've got Mr. Ramaphosa, and therefore it looks like there's a change. But actually, for the people on the ground, what has changed?
Nothing at all.
For people on the ground, they're still feeling like they're still poor, they're still hungry, there's no jobs. None of that has happened. So for us, what we're seeing for the DA is that actually there is an offer that says, how do we work with everybody, and how do we also ensure that that message of putting a job in every home, it cuts across all communities. So for me, I'm not. I look at his own favorability. And I think if you use that against Mr. Zuma, then of course he's be better.
Of course.
But frankly, I think what is the change that's happened?
And this hasn't impacted you, you know. Some will assume, and I'm thinking now back to 2017, the assumption was if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma emerges, that's a win. That's a different win for opposition parties. But if Cyril Ramaphosa does, it might be a little bit tricky to try and win over South Africans. Has that materialized?
Well, I think one of the things that need to happen is what we've did in the last number of years is told people that our biggest problem is corruption. And yes, it is. But actually our even bigger problem is the fact that we have an economy that is fundamentally broken and that needs reform, and that the ANC is incapable of reforming. So I think, like we saw, when he was elected, he was most popular. We've seen that decline. And as people get in reality of the lists coming up, the lights not coming on, I think the reality will come on. And I think more than anything, when you look at Zimbabwe, they had a euphoric moment when Mugabe was gone. And now today, Zimbabwe is suffering under the worst hyperinflation you can find. So to me, I think that we mustn't be fooled by a new driver in an old broken up bus. The same outcomes are going to achieve. My dream is to say, let's bring change. You see, if I had to posit a vision for us, it's going to be tough for the people of South Africa. But imagine a scenario where the ANC is below 50%. Imagine a scenario where actually we can reform our politics so that it's no longer about the identity of the person in racial terms, but actually the contestation of ideas. Imagine where we could put a government in place that could be accountable of the best people in the country. Imagine if we could move ahead and say to ourselves, actually what's going to happen now is that we're going to reform our economy and not be hell-bent by an alliance in the ANC that simply will keep Eskom the same, even if Eskom is not performing. But actually we could reform that and actually put a government that works for the people. That to me is an exciting dream. And that transition must happen. It must happen. If we reward people with votes because they've put a nice, shinier face on the outside, what is going to happen as a natural outcome is that you are saying it's okay to steal. It's okay to rob us for 10 years. So long as you just change the face at the next election cycle, we're comfortable with that. We cannot afford that as a people. I think change is necessary. And our hopes as a country is that living in a South Africa like we are, the potential is immense and we could really do much better than what we are now.
Those things that you've mentioned now are part of your targets, you know, bringing the ANC under 50%. Are you still on track to achieving that?
We're working hard in Gauteng, we're working hard in the Northern Cape, and we're working hard to retain the Western Cape. That was always the objectives, and we're on track to get there.
But polling, Mmusi, it's very interesting for me. Pretty much all polls outside of the DA aren't showing great figures for the DA. In fact, they show very slow growth, very little growth at these elections. But the DA's own internal polls seem to have put you miles ahead of many. Are you not concerned? I mean, you are the only ones who seem to see yourselves in good light, I suppose for obvious reasons. But other polls outside of you have produced really bad results for the DA.
No, I think that when I look at the industry that is polling, and this has become a new thing that's come into South Africa, really.
Yes, it's growing.
And one of the things that has started to happen is that at every election, polls have said to us, the DA, in Nelson Mandela Bay, they put us so way down. In Tshwane, they did the same. In Joburg, they did the same. So I've been through the history where polls and pollsters say things about us that are not true. What is the project of the DA now? If you say you want to build one South Africa for all, it's natural that ultimately you've got to grow, you're going to attract new voters, and for me, I'm not looking at those polls. I'm really looking at our project and where we're going, and it's quite appealing. Because one of the things that really excite me is that actually in this election, you'll see ordinary South Africans who suddenly are saying, I'm willing to be associated with the DA, I'm part of the DA, I'm there. And let's never forget how tough the electoral and complex the electoral cycle in South Africa is. I think sometimes we oversimplify it. But actually our message is resonating with more South Africans than it's ever done before.
I suppose we'll wait for the 8th of May to see that. You are a big believer in coalitions. I mean, the DA is part of coalitions in a number of metros as it stands. You are looking towards coalition talk come 2019 elections. Are you keen for the possibility?
I want to be the biggest party in all of that, and so I'm asking voters to come and make sure that the possibility of discussing coalitions is there, that ultimately the DA is the largest party in that because we're the ones who can hold the thing together. And so I really believe the future of South Africa is always around coalitions at national level, because I think that It's the way the world is orientated, but equally so, if we don't achieve that, we're just perpetuating a one-party state, and a one-party state has brought us state capture. That's naturally what happens. And the history of South Africa, whether it's colonialism, whether it's Afrikaner nationalism or African nationalism, means that we just have cycles of nationalism. So should we just wait for the next one? So the rise of maybe Zulu nationalism, or whatever the next cycle is, we cannot. We have to bring the change. And if we can achieve that, it'll serve our kids far better than what we think it is. And so therefore, for me, I'm saying the future is about the realignment of politics, a coalition of people who will share values on the constitution and on racial South Africa, a market-based economy, a capable state. We get those things on the table, we could really set this country to the future.
Now, the EFF says it's in a partnership with the DA, not a coalition. I think that's just semantics. But we've listened to now Julius Malema very recently speaking about how he feels about the DA. You know, he's upset about posters that are out and about how you must keep the EFF and the ANC out of the Western Cape. He's seen lots of posters where he says for him it's starting to feel very personal that the DA is out to get the EFF, and he doesn't think he wants to have coalition talks or anything like that with the DA. What is your sentiment to comments like that from, again, a leader of a party that you are in a working partnership with in a number of metros?
What are the principles of building a coalition on? And on racial South Africa, constitutionalism, a capable state, making sure that ultimately we eradicate corruption. Now, when you look at those tenets, it was the same Mr. Malema who said he'll cut off the throat of whiteness. A direct attack on the race of an individual. Now, can I sit back and say, that's okay because we have this? I said, on principle, I will not accept that. And in fact, I think it was the right call to make in Nelson Mandela Bay. Now they've formed a coalition of corruption there that is looting the resources of the people there. So, frankly, you are either principled or unprincipled. If you stand for principle, the principle is this, that even if whatever the arrangement is, if you are corrupt, you are corrupt, and we must stand up for it. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter. Because if I will be hypocritical if I failed to hold anybody to account.
So what are you saying, Mmusi? You're saying that you find the EFF to be corrupt?
All I'm simply saying is that when they make statements that are racist, I will not support them and I must call them out for it. And where his main concern is that there have been strong allegations on VBS. Those are serious issues. They must be investigated. And I can't sit here and say, well, it's in the EFF, let me keep hush-hush about it. No, there's a principle here, we must apply it across. And if there are allegations of corruptions against the DA, they also must be investigated.
But you remain in a relationship with them in Johannesburg and in Tshwane. When you're making these kind of comments now going into an election, one thinks, okay, Mmusi Maimane has got a point saying that there's a cloud hanging over the EFF, a VBS cloud hanging over their heads. It makes sense to me, I hear you. But you contradict yourself where you retain those relationships in those other metros. Because then you should get out of that relationship there too.
They must be investigated, and I can assure you, the decision we would make is that ultimately we must hold everybody to account. We must know the full extent of what's going to happen. And the mistake that we make is to assume that all coalitions must be centered around the who, not on the what.
Sure.
For me, I'm saying let's deal with the what. That's why I outlined those principles. That's how I outlined the fact that actually we could form a government that has an agenda for reform. And I will work with people who want that. But let me lastly say,
yes,
I'm not that desperate to stay into power that I'm willing to compromise everything.
But Mmusi, this is what I'm struggling with, the contradiction, because I hear what you're saying. They must be investigated. And I suppose upon investigation and they're found to be wrong, it makes sense to not retain those relationships. But you have those relationships, right? You're speaking about how it's not a coalition of who, it's a coalition of what? Let's say a partnership of what? But you are on the one hand saying they must be kept out of particular areas.
But don't forget, I'm not in a formal coalition with the EFF.
It's a partnership, I understand.
And what's going to happen now is that it's up to whether the EFF make a decision as to what they're going to do. Because I'm not in a formalized coalition with them. I don't have a written contract.
Yes.
If we were talking about the parties I'm in a written contract with, the Congress of the People, the ACDP, the Freedom Front, whatever the parties are, that are in coalition with, then if the same things were happening, believe you me, in the same way we took a view with the UDM, we called them in, we said, explain.
With Bobani, yes.
There, we had tangible relationships. I don't have a formal relationship with the EFF.
So you can't call the EFF and ask them, About VBS, is that what you're
We
saying?
must stand up, frankly, and let the systems of justice investigate those matters.
While retaining the relationship that you have with them in Tshwane and Joburg.
The relationship is such that if the EFF, like they did in Tshwane, before even the campaign said, they said they'll fold their arms when we're electing a new mayor, they made their decision.
But you now are operating on a basis of principle, Mmusi. Surely, if that's the case, and you have posters in the Western Cape that say keep the EFF out, you shouldn't keep a working relationship with them in Tshwane and and Johannesburg.
No. The fact of the matter is that the EFF will go out and make statements in an election campaign. They're entitled to do that. They are campaigning. We are out to maximize the people who want to turn out to vote. And I do think there would be something inherently dangerous about a coalition with the ANC and the EFF, because once you get to a two-thirds majority on those issues, the amendment to the Constitution around Section 25 then becomes possible, which is equally dangerous for where I sit. We are going into a national election here.
Yes.
Therefore, I must maximize how many voters turn out and communicate to them in such a way that makes them aware of the worries and the dangers that could come on board.
I'm going to accept that answer. I'm almost done. Let's speak about Patricia de Lille. You know, it's quite interesting how it's like a decampaign of the DA, you know. She is talking about this issue about whether she's fired or not. I know the High Court has kind of ruled on it, saying it belongs in the electoral court. But what is the position? I mean, it does feel like another voice saying no DA to the public.
No. Firstly, there are bigger issues to discuss other than this thing of Patricia de Lille, to be honest.
You don't see it affecting you in any way in the Western Cape?
And secondly, here is the thing. In politics, the term fired is common cause. Could we say that the voters of Johannesburg fired the ANC?
Yes, we can.
We can. So it applies in this instance. It is language, because I don't have an employment contract with SA so that I can go to labor law. That's why it's not a labor law issue. It's actually about the fact that we sought to hold her accountable. We sought to say there were contracts that were adjudicated that had to be reversed. So she'd lost the confidence of her caucus. So frankly, she jumped before she could in fact be pushed. So however language you put around that, in my view, it's tantamount to being fired.
But does she not impact the DA? Here's where I want to go. I don't want to go through, is she right, is she wrong? I think that is not in the hands of the electoral court from what I understand. What I'm trying to get at is, does she impact the DA? Because every time I listen to her speak, there's a lot of talk about the DA coming from the good leader. So what is the impact of that? Are you concerned at all? You see it not having any impact on the DA?
What offer is she making to the people?
She's speaking about the DA. I'm aligned to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'm saying she's not speaking about the good offering. She's focused a lot on the DA and a battle with the DA.
And so what I'm saying is, when we go speak to South Africans, this election is about the future of this country. When you speak to South Africans in the Western Cape everywhere, the question they're asking is not good. Asking how can we create more jobs? They're asking, how can I be safe? How do I get a provincial rail service in the country? Certainly in the Western Cape, in Gauteng, we want to put a provincial rail service. How do we make sure that we ultimately set up the future for citizens? That's what citizens are interested in. I think citizens get put off by people who come out and say, all I can talk about is just their past. They want to talk about their future. That's why in this election, even for us as the party, you will notice that our election offer has been that one South Africa for all, that future about putting jobs, that making sure we're safe, that securing of our borders, the eradication of corruption. That's what been the focus. And I think when a party can only campaign on just saying what is the past, it's very clear that they haven't got ideas about where this country's got to go. And I'm very committed to the future of this country.
My parting shot to you. You and I last spoke in this very office, actually. We spoke about your position as leader of the DA and whether or not you're concerned about what will happen to you post the elections, depending on how you perform. Do you still feel very confident that no matter what happens, come 8th of May, Mmusi Maimane will remain leader of the Democratic Alliance?
Yeah, the people of the Democratic Alliance, I have seen an amazing work as a team. The party has never been more united. The party is focused. The party is growing out. And for the first time in this election, I think we've campaigned more than we've ever done before. I think the party, across all the provinces, you've seen a diversity of leadership. We've seen a growth. Our lists have been the most diverse we've seen. I'm comfortable, as I sit here, that the election results will deal with themselves. But I'm so proud of what this party stands for. I am proud of the fact that where we've been in government, we've worked jolly hard. When people wrote us off, they said this thing is never going to work. Yet here we are today, a number of years later. Joburg is turning around. We're delivering services to the people. Tshwane is doing likewise. Cape Town is continuing to. So where we're in government, we're showing positive results. As a party, we're working together, focused on the future. And I really believe that from where I sit, certainly having taken the party through that, it shows that the future of this organization is one that is healthy and going forward. And Mmusi Maimane is only a part of a broader leadership team that is taking this organization forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was dear leader Mmusi Maimane speaking to us on News 24, his views on One Their Manifesto, as well as the campaign trail ahead of the elections, which take place on the 8th of May.